Here is part of the Dorset coastline, and it is in this neighborhood that the Atomic Energy Authority proposed to site a new research establishment. When such research centers have effluents which may be mildly radioactive, the one safe way of dealing with them is by disposal to the sea. Naturally, every precaution must be taken to safeguard the interests of residents, holidaymakers, and local fishing interests. It was with this aim in view that Exercise Mermaid was planned and carried out. In July 1956, a team from Harwell began to make preparations for the exercise. It was proposed to discharge into the sea a harmless fluorescent dye which could be detected in very low concentrations. Before this was done, it was necessary to take and test samples of the seawater in the area to ascertain the natural fluorescence already present. Three motor fishing vessels were loaned by the Admiralty and manned by Royal Naval personnel. These, together with two 30-foot cutters, comprised the 4th Special Squadron allocated to the exercise. The vessels were overhauled and fitted with all the necessary equipment. On completion, the ships sailed for Weymouth, which was to be the operational headquarters. In addition, aerial reconnaissance was provided by a helicopter from the Royal Naval Air Station, Leon Solent. During the exercise, the exact location of the vessels was established by radar and by means of Decca navigational aids. At Weymouth, additional equipment was installed and checked. Tanks are made ready for the preparation of the dye solution. Independent tests are carried out by officers of the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food in all cases where discharge of radioactivity to the sea is proposed. Samples of fish life and marine growth are taken in the neighborhood. In their laboratories at Lowestoft, these specimens are examined. By this means, the specialists in this field can predict the biological and physical concentrating processes. HMS Scott of the Admiralty Hydrographic Service provide information as to the nature and shape of the seabed. This information will be used to plan the run of the final effluent pipeline and also to help in the planning and interpretation of the dye experiments. The dye used in these experiments is called amino G acid. It gives a vivid blue fluorescence when tested under ultraviolet light and is detectable in concentrations as low as 1 part in 1,000 million. This dye is thoroughly mixed and then pumped aboard one of the ships. The motor fishing vessels with the Harwell teams aboard leave Weymouth behind. At an airfield, not far from the coast, A photographer of the authority prepares to board a helicopter. His task is to photograph the die patch, give a detailed report of the die's shape, measure its movements, and if required, direct the ships to its center. The ships reach the discharge point of the proposed pipeline off Arishmel Gap. The discharge vessel stops engines, and after a warning signal to the other ships, the die discharge pipe is lowered to the seabed and the discharge commences. Marker buoys are dropped during the discharge of the die to aid subsequent location by the ships and the helicopter. The die rises slowly to the surface and quickly disperses. Meanwhile, all ships are sampling on a prearranged plan in order to establish the direction taken by the die and the extent of the patch. Exact positioning and location of the ships is essential on an exercise of this kind. Radar assists. The exact position is given by the deco-navigational aid, which, coupled with the track plotter, gives a permanent record of the ship's courses. Several types of samplers were used on the exercise, and samples drawn from the surface, seabed, and many intermediate depths. The results obtained these enabled the distribution of the die to be determined. In addition to the sampling carried out from the ships, it was necessary to examine the water further inshore. Was the die being washed ashore, or was it being carried out into the channel? Small teams patrolled the beaches and collected samples at regular and frequent intervals. The cutters were used to sample some 50 yards from the beaches in areas inaccessible to the shore teams or the motor fishing vessels. The exercise at sea having been completed, the cutters, the helicopter, and the ships returned to base. On arrival at the base, the bottles filled during the day's run are brought ashore. Today, some 600 samples have been taken. Tomorrow will bring forth about the same number. In this way, a complete picture of the behavior of the dye solution is being built up. The bottles are taken to the shore laboratory and the contents tested for fluorescence using an ultraviolet light. Each result is checked and recorded against the ship's position when the sample was taken. All the laboratory results are scrutinized carefully and the results compared against the theoretical predictions. Calculations are made and graphs drawn which give the results in a complete but concise form. Authorization for the discharge of radioactivity to the sea is the concern of the Ministers of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food, and Housing and Local Governments. The results obtained will help to decide the maximum permissible amount of radioactivity that can safely be discharged in the effluent. At the UK AEA's factory at Windscale, situated on the Cumberland coast, the controlled dispersal of radioactivity to the sea has been carried out for a number of years. Over 5 years' experience has been gained, and during this time an intensive program of sampling and testing has been carried out. Samples of sand, seaweed and fish are collected and examined. In addition, fish, lobsters, edible seaweed and other forms of marine life are kept in tanks to which known amounts of radioactivity are added. In this way, the effect on marine organisms can be studied. With the experience already gained at Windscale, and with the knowledge of the properties and effects of radioactivity so well advanced, it is certain that the fish in our waters and the sands of our shores will remain uncontaminated.